Scientists discovered that bacterium hiding in ordinary soil activates the same brain chemistry that antidepressants target, not metaphorically, biologically. Your relationship with plants isn't just a hobby, it might be a prescription, and before you assume that's an exaggeration, let me show you the science, because it goes much deeper than you think. It might explain why, since the pandemic, I've let dozens of plants quietly take over my home. Maybe I knew something my conscious mind didn't. We've lived alongside plants for our entire evolutionary history. For nearly all of that time, we were outside, hands in soil, surrounded by green, breathing air that had never seen a HEPA filter. Then in the span of a few generations, we moved indoors, and something changed. Today, I want to show you what science is only now beginning to understand about what that shift cost us, and what your houseplants have been quietly doing for you all along. It started with a question nobody thought to ask. In 2007, a researcher named Christopher Lowry was working at the University of Bristol in the UK, studying a humble bacterium called Mycobacterium vaccae, a microorganism that lives naturally in soil. Scientists had noticed something curious. Cancer patients who were treated with it reported feeling unexpectedly better, not physically, emotionally. Their quality of life improved in ways that treatment couldn't explain. Lowry wanted to know why. What he found was remarkable. When he introduced the preparation of M. vaccae into mice, something lit up in their brains, a specific cluster of neurons that produce serotonin, the same chemical that antidepressants are designed to protect. The bacteria didn't just activate those neurons, it changed the animal's behavior. They became calmer, more resilient, less like mice under stress and more like mice on Prozac. He published that finding in the journal Neuroscience, and then he kept going. After moving to the University of Colorado Boulder, Lowry built on that discovery across the following decade. A 2016 study showed that injecting M. vaccae before a stressful event could prevent a PTSD-like syndrome in mice entirely, blocking the anxiety, blocking the stress-induced colitis, protecting the body as much as the mind. Then in 2019, his team identified the specific molecule responsible, a fatty acid hidden inside the bacterium that, when taken up by immune cells, shuts off the body's inflammatory cascade. That's the mechanism. That's the special sauce, as Lowry called it. A single fat evolved over millennia inside a microbe that lives in dirt that tells your immune system to stand down. He called what he was working toward a stress vaccine, not a metaphor, a literal immunization against the psychological damage of chronic stress. Pause on that for a moment. The soil beneath your feet contains organisms that co-evolved alongside us for hundreds of thousands of years, and they are still quietly trying to regulate our nervous systems. We just stopped listening. Now, before we go any further, I want to be straight with you about something, because this is where the science gets genuinely interesting and where the internet gets it wrong. The studies on M. vaccae were conducted on mice using injections of heat-killed bacteria, not humans touching houseplant soil. Most commercial potting mix is steam sterilized to kill pests and mold, which means they may contain very little of the bacteria that activate those serotonin neurons. The trace amounts you encounter when you water your pothos are not, by themselves, a clinical substitute for antidepressant medication. What the research does show is something subtler, and in some ways, more interesting. The bacteria can become airborne when you water or disturb the soil, and researchers believe that even a trace of daily soil contact with these microbes, the kind of low-level exposure our ancestors had every day, may have meaningful cumulative effects on the immune system and stress response. Dr. Lowry himself has described the goal as helping modern humans reconnect with old friends, organisms we co-evolved with, and whose absence from our lives may be quietly costing us. There's a similar story with air quality. In 1989, NASA published a study showing that common houseplants could remove trace volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, from sealed laboratory chambers. The internet turned that into "plants clean your air." The honest version is more nuanced. In a real home with ventilation, open windows, and doors that open and close, plants work far too slowly to meaningfully change air quality. you'd need somewhere between 10 and 1,000 plants per square meter to match with a standard ventilation system does. That's not a living room, that's a rainforest. But here's what's true. The benefits of houseplants on our minds and bodies are real. They just work through different pathways than the viral headlines suggest. Roger Ulrich demonstrated one of them in 1984 when he examined hospital records from a suburban Pennsylvania hospital. Surgical patients whose windows looked out on trees spent less time recovering than patients whose windows faced a brick wall. 7.96 days compared to 8.7. The difference wasn't enrollment therapy or soil contact. It was simply the presence of something green and alive in their field of view. And in the 1980s, environmental psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan developed what they called attention restoration theory to explain why. Their research, formally published in their 1989 book, The Experience of Nature, proposed that nature replenishes a specific cognitive resource, the kind of focused, effortful attention we use for work, decisions, and screens. They called its depletion directed attention fatigue, and they found that natural environments, unlike cities or office environments, engage us in something different: soft fascination. The effortless, involuntary attention you give to clouds moving, leaves shifting, water flowing. It doesn't demand anything from you, and that non-demand is exactly what allows the overworked parts of your brain to rest. A fern on your desk isn't filtering your air, but it may be doing something quieter and stranger, answering a question your nervous system never stopped asking. It may be giving your mind permission to stop. To understand why any of this works, you have to go back a very long way. In 1984, biologist E.O. Wilson published a book called Biophilia, a word first coined by psychologist Erich Fromm, meaning simply the love of life. Wilson's argument was this: we didn't just live in nature, we became ourselves there. Our nervous systems were calibrated by it. Our threat detection, our stress response, our sense of safety, all of it was shaped in our environments that were green, alive, and metabolically active. Which means that when we look at a healthy plant, something ancient in us pays attention. Psychologists call part of this the savanna hypothesis. Humans across cultures showed a consistent preference for landscapes that resemble the African savanna, where our species first evolved. Open spaces with scattered trees, access to water, long sightlines. We feel safest when we can see far and have somewhere to shelter. And we read green as a signal. Lush vegetation means water, it means food, it means the environment can sustain life. Brown and barren means drought, scarcity, danger. That signal still works. It runs beneath language, beneath conscious thought, through the oldest parts of the brain. When your amygdala registers a living, thriving plant, something ancient concludes: the environment is safe. Heart rate slows, cortisol drops, the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, begins to take over from the fight or flight one. This is how patients in green hospital rooms redirect their body's energy toward healing rather than stress management. It's why workers with a plant in their sightline report higher concentration and lower anxiety. It's why the fractal patterns of a fern, patterns that appear throughout nature, from coastlines to snowflakes, produce measurable relaxation responses in the brain. Wilson argued that our increasing separation from nature isn't just an aesthetic loss. He called the belief that we can flourish apart from the living world a delusion, one that had only arisen in the last moment of human history. In his view, what we experience as vague modern malaise, the background hum of depletion that no productivity hack can quite fix, is in part a biological consequence of living in environments our nervous systems were never built for. Dr. Lowry's work adds one more layer. Those old friends he spent 2 decades studying, their presence near soil, near plants, may tell your immune system something ancient. You are where you belong. Stand down. Your houseplants aren't a cure, but they may be a small daily reminder to a very old part of you that the world is still alive. The next time you water your monstera or move your pothos a little closer to the window, you're doing something that goes deeper than decoration. You're tending something ancient in yourself, quietly and perfectly, one plant at a time, for your own nervous system to rest. That's not small. In a world designed to keep you stimulated and on task every waking hour, creating a small pocket of soft fascination in your own home might be one of the most genuinely radical things you can do. And you probably already knew that. You just need the science to confirm what your hands already understood. I've put together a list of the indoor plants researchers most consistently associate with soft fascination and stress recovery. It's linked in the description if you'd like a place to start. If this made you curious, there's more where this came from. The world is more alive than we remember. I'm Eloquence, and I'll see you in the next one.